Coming up this week in computer hardware, ASUS ROG Swift PG279Q. 165 hertz makes everything better. Surface Pro 4 hands-on reviews. Steam Link first impressions, 6 gigabytes per second. Samsung's new SSD is fast. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 339, recorded October 29th, 2015. 165 hertz makes everything better.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Drobo, a family of safe and expandable, yet simple-to-use storage arrays. Drobos are designed to protect your important data forever. Visit drobo.com/twit and use the code TWIT100 to save $100 off a Drobo Mini, Drobo 4Bay, or Drobo 5N. And by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Right now, get free FedEx shipping when you go to ring.com/twitch. And by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with free step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code TWITCH at checkout.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most delightful, most engaging, and occasionally even the most accurate information on technology available anywhere in the universe, known or unknown. That was technically mostly on the internet, but I like adding in the universe there. Ryan, are you horrified? Have I overpromised once again? Actually, I've underpromised.
Yeah, no, I feel completely confident in the assertions you made today, and I think we have nothing but excellent show material to back it up.
This is it's been an interesting week, right? You've got the PG279Q, which is a new G-Sync monitor. Both of us have been hands-on. I didn't expect to get one in, but we got a Surface Pro 4, and this keyboard is shockingly good. We'll talk about that. Where should we start? Apple, the Roku 4s, have been out. The Apple TV reviews are just starting to show up. We'll talk about the Apple TV next week. But should we start with that monitor? I love monitors. You want to start with the monitor?
We can start wherever you think we should start. The monitor is a good place to do that. So the ASUS ROG Swift line of products was originally just one product. It used to be the ROG Swift PG278Q. It had a model number, but everybody just called it the Swift. Now they've taken that brand and they've expanded it. The first Swift, the PG278Q, was a 2560 by 1440 resolution, 144 hertz TN panel that supported G-Sync. And it was easily the most popular, most sold, hardest to get a hold of, best G-Sync monitor you could ask for at that time, because TN panels were pretty much all that could go that fast, and all that had been qualified and all that was selling. Around CES time, we started to hear inclinations or little bits of information about updates to the G-Sync field or family of products where, hey, people really want IPS screens that can do this, right? TN's fine, but there are many people that really see the benefits of IPS. They want to do the improved color clarity, the improved viewing angles, all that stuff that goes along with being an IPS or an NVA panel versus a TN panel. So Acer released one called the XB270HU, and it's a fine monitor. ASUS has now released theirs, the ROG Swift PG279Q. Now it's, again, 2560 by 1440, 27-inch IPS G-Sync screen. This one, those specifications kind of match other monitors that are on the market already, particularly that Acer. This one has a unique feature of supporting refresh rates up to 165 hertz, which is it's the first time I have seen that at that resolution. For like a consumer product, right? And it does this by actually overclocking the panel. When you take the monitor out of the box and hook it up to your system, the highest it will be able to go is 144 hertz. When you go into the OSD, the on-screen display through the buttons. You hit a little switch, and it says the very first option is overclocking. And do you want to enable it or disable it? You say, yes, I want to enable it. And then you can set the new maximum refresh rate from 144 up to 165. Obviously, if you're going to do this, you set it to 165 because clearly you want it to be the highest it can get. So the 165 replaces the 144 refresh rate option in your EDID, which gets sent back to your PC, and thus now your monitor can support 165 hertz refresh rate at IPS screens at 2560 by 1440 resolution. So it's a pretty impressive thing. Now, I will say, before I say anything else about like the gaming experience on it, the amount of perceivable improvement or change from 144 hertz just using it in Windows to 165 hertz was surprising to me. There was more of a difference than I expected it to be, right? I kind of thought going into it, you know, the difference between 144 and 165 is going to be negligible. You're not really going to be able to tell. It's not like going from 60 to 120 or even 120 to 144. There's less of a variance, and you're kind of getting this area of diminishing returns. As it turns out, that wasn't really the case. Both Alan and I, when we were testing out this monitor, could tell immediately the difference between 144 and 165. There was added smoothness to it. It was described as kind of almost having this appearance of not having a refresh rate. Like it was almost like it was a constant signal display or something like that. Clearly it has a refresh rate. It's just, you're getting to the point where maybe you're crossing a line where it doesn't matter as much to more people. Obviously, some people are going to be more or less sensitive to it than others. But I was surprised what the difference was, even at the Windows desktop, like moving windows around and interacting with browsers and File Explorer windows and that type of stuff was noticeably improved from 144 up to 165, which was interesting.
Wow, I wouldn't have expected that.
I did not either. I did not either. Now, when it comes to gaming, so from a gaming perspective, the PG279Q is a fantastic display. It still supports G-Sync. Now you have the range of, you know, effectively 0 FPS to 165 FPS that can run at a variable refresh. It should be incredibly easy for you to game inside that range. Effectively, right? Any game, modern title, you turn everything up, you're probably going to be running somewhere inside 1 to 165 frames per second. Seems likely. Now, I will say that from a gaming perspective, the difference between a 144 peak refresh and a 165 peak refresh is going to be a little bit more minimal, because basically what you're doing is you're allowing the game to have a slightly higher or slightly larger window of variable refresh. So now you're getting 21 more hertz of expansive. Did it catch up to me? There it goes. So it works fine. But I would hesitate that there aren't many games where you're peaking at 144 frames per second, probably. And those that tend to be games that maybe don't require the twitchiness factor, right? Like, for example, we booted up Unreal Tournament 2004 because I knew I could run that game at 165 frames per second easily with the GTX 980 Ti, and it looked fantastic. It was glassy and smooth, and it was an awesome experience. But I don't know if there are a whole bunch of people that are really worried about, you know, hey, I was playing Call of Duty X or, you know, Grand Theft Auto Y, and my frame rate was getting up to 144, close to that, and so I wanted a little bit more range of variable refresh before I was forced to either enable or disable VSync, for example. So whether or not that makes a huge difference in your experience gaming-wise is kind of a debatable, but the difference on the desktop side was actually more impressive, which I thought, like you said here, I was not expecting either. Build quality of the monitor is fantastic. If you had or used an ROG Swift before, it's essentially the same industrial design, the same kind of plastic housing, a matte finish to everything. Nothing's glossy. Nothing's going to reflect overhead lights or any other lights in your room that might distract you. It supports height adjustment and rotation and tilting and all that type of stuff that you would expect. It's a much better build quality than the Acer XP270HU, which is the other kind of comparable G-Sync display. It's still expensive. It's $799 is what the MSRP of the display will be when it starts to ship in the first week of November. So that is the same price that the original ROG Swift launched at, which was a 144 hertz TN panel. So even though the price hasn't come down, you're getting a better panel and feature set than you did before, right? So technically prices have come down, right? If you think about it that way, but it's still an expensive product. There is a FreeSync monitor made by ASUS that has a very similar design to it. It's a 144 hertz IPS panel that only supports variable refresh between 35 and 90, but it is about $220 less in terms of actual cost. So there's that. That's the people who complain about the Apple tax might also complain about the NVIDIA G-Sync tax. There's validity to that argument, whether or not you wanna bite into the discussion or argument about it. G-Sync monitors are more expensive. They do produce a better experience, but whether or not it's worth the added cost is maybe a decision everybody else has to make. But like I said, or like I have been saying, if you're an NVIDIA GeForce user, you got to buy a G-Sync monitor because it doesn't work the other way around. And if you're an AMD user, you got to buy a FreeSync monitor because you can't use a G-Sync display and support variable refresh. So unless you plan on changing monitors and changing GPU vendors, you're kind of, you know which direction you're going. So
you know which direction you're going, young man or woman. Just go there. Testing GPU power draw to increase refresh rates using the ASUS PG279Q. So do GPUs use more power when you run the monitor faster?
So
there's a logic there.
in this case, yeah, they do. So this was pointed out by a commenter in that review, and at first I kind of didn't really think much of it until I hooked it up and tested it. So if you look at that graph on the first graph on that story, where we look at measured power draw at those refresh rates, you'll notice that, so like the blue line is the monitor power, and it kind of stays pretty much the same. It goes up a watt or two every time we increase refresh rates. But if you look at the green line, that's actually idle power consumption of the system. And at 60 to 100 to 120, you notice that the power consumption stays relatively low, 73, 75, 76 watts of usage. But as soon as we hit 144 hertz, that idle consumption goes to 133, and at 165 it goes up to 137. Right, so that's nearly doubling the idle power draw of the system. You're basically kind of increasing power draw by 70, 80 watts, about 60 or 70 watts, I guess, on the GPU side, just by increasing your refresh rate at the Windows desktop, right? That this is not while gaming, this is not anything else. This is sitting idle on the Windows desktop with a mostly black screen and icons sitting there. The reason the power goes up is because your clock speed goes up. At 60, 100, 120 hertz, the GTX 980 Ti was running at 135 megahertz, kind of its lowest possible frequency. As soon as you went up to 144, that clock speed jumped up to 885, which is a huge jump. And that's where you get that power draw from. That's about 30% of the TDP of that GPU in its entirety. And it starts to heat up the GPU, right? It heats up the GPU enough that the fans have to turn on. You know, they're very low and quiet. It's not like going to distract you. But the fans that would normally sitting there idle, not spinning up at all when your GPU is running at 135 megahertz, now have to turn on in order to keep the GPU cool as you're running it at 835 or 885 megahertz. So that's a significant jump. The AMD setup did not do this. We tested 60, 120, and 144 on an R9 Fury, and it kind of 69, 70, and then 71 watts, right? Like, so it kind of stayed static. The problem is we don't know why it's causing it. We know it's happening, but we don't know what is causing it, right? So like my kind of working theory is that the pixel clock, which is a separate clock domain in a GPU, that determines how much throughput it can actually send out through the display connection, right? How many pixels it can actually, once they're all rendered and ready to go, send out, is tied to the GPU clock in some way. They're not completely independent clock domains. They're tied together by some multiplier or something like that. And crossing that 120 to 144 hertz line, somewhere in that, the GPU decides it needs to be able to draw at a faster rate, or it's worried about, blanking out or blinking or cutting out or losing connection or something like that. So it needs to run the pixel clock higher in order to have the additional bandwidth. Well, when you do that, for whatever reason, this is causing the GPU clock to need to spike up that high as well. Like, it would be different if maybe it went from 135 to 300 or something, and the GPU clock is much less impactful on kind of total power draw. But in terms of this stuff here, it's significant, and we have several questions into NVIDIA about it, like why it happens on theirs, but it's not happening on AMD. The same thing does not happen when we connect a when we swap out the PG279Q, which is the G-Sync monitor, where we saw the big power spikes at idle, for an MG279Q, which is a FreeSync monitor running at 144 hertz. We don't see the power draw increase. So what is the complication there? What's the reasoning for that? We just don't know the answer yet, but it is interesting. So I've seen several forum threads today, kind of people hypothesizing what's going on. People saying the same thing kind of happens if you have multiple monitors connected to a GPU, or if you have an NVIDIA iFinity or SLI or surround configuration set up. So there's apparently more going on than we really know about quite yet. So,
have you tested it with other cards in the EVGA? Is there any possibility that it's brand specific? I mean, I doubt it, to be honest with you.
It's possible. It's possible it could be like GPU specific. I don't think it would be brand specific. But no, I haven't done any further testing that. I just kind of wanted to get an idea of what NVIDIA's answer was first before we kind of validate or invalidate their claims in regards to that. But hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully we'll hear back. It's like a touchy area for them because they don't want to come out. I think they need to come out and say something, because otherwise people are going to take this little bit of information we have and say, oh, G-Sync causes your power consumption to go up by 80 watts, blah, blah, blah. It's other disadvantage of G-Sync and proprietary standards and blah, blah, blah. So I think they need to come out and say something or address it in some way. It's just a matter of when and where and how long it'll be to do that. But I don't think they'll be able to, I don't know if they'll be able to fix it, but they might be able to say, hey, this is why. And maybe in the next architecture, we'll have a fix for it.
We wait with bated breath. Yep. Oh man, that's just a crazy 201 watts. That's a huge amount of electricity to be pulling through there. Steam Link first impressions. It was interesting. I was at a gathering, right, where they bring a bunch of products and companies and their PR reps and members of the press together into a room. The group Pepcom always do a fun thing, and it was funny because I saw someone there talking about streaming games. They've fixed it, streaming games over the internet, and yeah, that smirky little laugh right there pretty much says it all. It's a great theory. The internet is a horrible place to stream games, even apparently for Steam. Steam Link, Brian, you wrote this up for PC Per. Yeah, this is the game stream. This is the box. This is the beast. This is going to be the thing that allows you to take advantage of Valve and Steam and all of its awesomeness and run it around the house for $50 or $50 per monitor in your house. I mean,
it's an amazing idea, right? Like the promise is you've got your gaming PC up in your room or your office or whatever, but you really want to play games on your TV downstairs. You don't want to run a 50-foot HDMI cable along with USB extensions or something like that. So you buy this little box. Actually, I got one right here. You buy this little box, right? That's got couple USB ports on it, Ethernet port. It's got integrated wireless and HDMI. And all it does is it decodes video and displays it and then receives input from your controller or keyboard or mouse and sends it back over the network and goes.
Right.
And so you set it there next to your TV, and thus now you can do all the things you want to do. It's a fantastic idea. It works. The in-home network streaming works better than the internet-based streaming, as you would expect, just because of the inherent latency differences. But that being said, my experience with the Steam Link wasn't as kind of earth-shattering or amazing as I expected it to be. So it was interesting, right? Because I was testing out both it and the Steam controller, which we talked about last week. And I had just finished playing BioShock Infinite on the Steam controller on a gaming PC locally. Like the controller was hooked up to the gaming machine. And I had just played it. And the first thing I did was I said, okay, now hook up the Steam Link to the TV behind me. And now let's stream from the main PC the same game, BioShock Infinite, on that same controller. And as soon as it started, I could tell a difference in what the input latency was, right? Like just, you know, trying to aim your gun in the game started a little bit later and it ended a little bit later, right? So any spins or aiming, you had to kind of compensate for that stuff. And I do think over time you could do that with just about any game. You could learn how to compensate before and after, but you don't want to have to, right? And also then when you go back to your main PC and you're playing locally, you're going to be unaccustomed to what that experience is, right? So it is a game dependent experience, I will say. BioShock Infinite, first person shooter, requires some precision. Not a fantastic idea. I played some games like FTL or Tale of or Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, or even Dirt Rally, right, which is a racing game. Racing games kind of inherently have some cars don't respond instantly when you turn the wheel or when you hit the gas, right?
True.
So there's already kind of this latency that you're used to feeling from that. And so adding this little bit of latency to it doesn't feel as bad, right? I think you can get away with playing racing games relatively easily with this, with a little bit of kind of change, you know, figuring out how things work and going that way, getting used to it. First person shooters, I don't think would work. You know, strategy games, yes. Casual games, yes. There's a whole lot you'll still be able to play over this. But for those people that want to play everything over the Steam Link, I think you're going to be disappointed still in kind of what those results are. And that's just physics, man. Like the electrical bits have to get from one place to another place and then back to another place and then to your eyeballs, right? Like there are physical limitations that, despite what NVIDIA says about GeForce Now and despite what Steam or Valve wants to say about the Steam Link, we don't have a fix for it yet. Like the fix is inherent to our network technology, right? It has to change in a lot of areas. But still neat, just not as neat as I'd hoped. Again, it's only $50, right? So maybe it's worth giving a shot. Like you can use an Xbox 360 controller, an Xbox One controller with it, or you can buy the Steam controller if you want as well. So for $50, it might be worth trying in your house and seeing what games you can play, and maybe the games that you can play are still the ones you want to play while sitting on a couch or whatever, and kind of that works.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think you have to experience it, and because we built, Michael Hand and I were playing around on a show we do called Possibly Unsafe, and we essentially built a Valve streaming box out of a Raspberry Pi, and it worked. But for some games, the lag was intolerable, and other games it was manageable, and I think. You know, if you have network issues, Wi-Fi issues, or you know, don't have access to Ethernet.
I should say all of my testing we did was hardwired connections too, so we were giving it the best possible shot,
which is good. But you know, and it's something to think about. Like, you know, if you have issues with your Wi-Fi, fix your issues with your Wi-Fi before you try to go like this, or put it in a place where you can run an Ethernet cable to it.
Right.
It's interesting. It's, you know, I find myself seeing a lot of hardware in the past few weeks where I'm like, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I like what that's doing. It doesn't do it very well, and I want to pay my money for it. But boy, that's a nice collection of hardware right there. And I'm just, I don't know. Gaming on a PC just seems to be so much better than gaming on streaming, or gaming on a console seems to be so much better than you know, streaming games.
Yeah, I agree. Like I still believe fundamentally that streaming games will be a large part of the ecosystem going forward. There's just some things that have to change. Either the hardware and the logic needs to change and how it handles things like late warp, or they need to move the servers that host the games very close to your house. Like each ISP needs to have nodes throughout their thing, and then you're leasing it through those ISPs, for example, is one idea as well that they've put out there. So that's kind of where I think we're at. Like it's still a neat experiment, and it's maybe the most complete, best user experience out of the box experience for one of these streaming devices we've ever used. And unlike GeForce Now, doesn't require you to have a Shield device. It doesn't require you to have an NVIDIA graphics card, even, right? You could technically run it off of an Intel powered system if you wanted to. So there's more flexibility and capability in this than most of the others. Either way,
more flexibility. Actually, the fact that it just seems to be complete is such a nice thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
agreed.
Somewhere around here. Oh, look, it's in a pile over there. The NVIDIA Shield TV box, which that's actually what had me thinking about it. Like, fantastic piece of hardware. If you're not streaming games to it, there's just not a really good use for it. I love Android TV. I love how quick and responsive it is. I love how it handles high definition video. But the game offerings for it, if you are not streaming from a PC, you're just miserable. Or at least were 9 days ago, last time I downloaded a few Android games that were designed for a touchscreen and tried to use the control with them. But I so close, and yet
I know
so far.
Yeah.
We should take a moment to thank one of our sponsors for this episode, the crew over at Drobo. Drobo's back on the TWiCH network, and they are a sponsor of this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. If you've ever seen me on Tech Thing, you've heard me say, back up your data. We've talked about it here, 3-2-1 backups, 3 copies on 2 different mediums, one that's not in the same location as where you keep your data. Drobo is safe, it's simple, it's easy to expand. Pretty much for all your storage needs. They have a whole family of external storage arrays. If you go over to Drobo, if you haven't looked at Drobo for a while, you should check it out because they have direct attached devices like the Drobo Mini, Drobo 5D that I'm running on my desk right now. And just for fun, actually, just to be cruel, I've only got 3 drives in the Drobo 5D right now. I pulled one of them out, yanked the power plug out of the wall, slammed the drive back in, powered it back up, and it's fine. I like that. Not because I think that's a very good idea for you to treat your data or your hardware for that matter. But Drobo's done a lot of work to make managing, safe data storage simple and easy to deal with. If you're looking for a network-attached storage device, whether it's a local backup tool or to use for a server, check out the Drobo 5N. It's simple to use, right? You can plug it into a switch or a router. If you can connect an Ethernet cable and download an application, you are good to go. Apps let you back up your data to 2 different cloud service providers or sync via BitTorrent sync, which means it will take care of the one part of your 3-2-1 backup. Quad-core ARM processor. 3 of the cores are available to run Linux. There's tools for developers, including a full LAMP stack, Node.js, and WordPress. It supports C, C++, GoPro, Python, and Ruby, as well as Git to host your own repo. Drobos are great if you want to work with video or photos or want to set up your own media server. One of the big challenges in video production, which I have been involved with for a few years, is the fact that you're stashing each and every week gigabytes of data. A couple years ago, before 6 terabyte hard drives, that got pretty insane. And the whole backup process for a NAS used to be like, oh, I'm filling this NAS. I got to go buy another NAS with much bigger drives in it and copy the stuff from the first NAS to the second NAS. And then I can turn around and put bigger drives in the first NAS and kind of, keep stacking up piles of hardware. Or you could try to do something like build a free NAS box, which is intellectually challenging in ways that most people may not actually enjoy. Drobos are simple, man. They're reliable. Data that's been written to your Drobo and is not yet on the disk is protected. If there's a power loss, it's got a battery inside that should be good for the life of the device. They have an internal eUSB device where data is copied if there's a power failure to protect against long outages. It's expandable. If you want to put a bigger drive in a Drobo, you take a drive out and you put a bigger drive in. It's really simple. You can mix and match different drive sizes. I've got a 2 or 3 and a 4 terabyte drive sitting in the one I have on my desk right now. If you like simple, Drobo's really helpful. There's green lights on the front of the Drobo 5D sitting on my desktop right now. That means all of the drives are okay. If it's worried about a drive, it goes yellow. If a drive has failed, it goes red. It's not really difficult. Beyond RAID is what they call their technology. It lets you expand on the fly, mix and match drives. Thunderbolt, Gigabit Ethernet, USB 3.0 connections. The one I'm using is direct attached. It's got a pair of Thunderbolt connections and a USB 3.0 connection. There's an SSD hot cache option that'll accelerate database and small file reads. I can put an MSATA card in this. It's smart, man. It's simple. It's easy. If you've been trying to figure out a way to store lots of data and do it in a way, or to serve data around your house, or you just don't want to deal with the joys of building your own network-attached storage device, check out Drobo. Drobo.com/twit to learn more and check out their complete line of products. When you use the code TWIT100, that's TWIT100, you'll save $100 off the purchase of a Drobo Mini, a Drobo 4-Bay, or a Drobo 5M. Drobo.com/twit. Use the code TWIT100, and we want to thank Drobo for their support. They make shiny hardware that's easy to run. This is a good thing, people.
Indeed.
Oh, my goodness. We both have been spending quality time with the Surface Pro 4. I basically, we're talking about in the episode of Tech Thing that posts up today. I did not expect to like it as much as I do. In part because the Surface Pro 3 was, I'm going to call it kind of miserable. That's probably not a nice thing to say, but the keyboard and the touchpad on the Surface Pro 4 are fantastic. They've got a glass screen now that looks gorgeous. It's 1.73, maybe 1.76 pounds. It's well under 2 pounds with the keyboard. Battery life seems to be good, somewhere in the 8 to 9 hour range. It was funny. I fired it up with just to be cruel, right? Because it's a 15 watt TDP part. Skylake part inside of the Core i5 that I'm running here with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And so I fired up a video encode using Handbrake and was watching it at CPU-Z, and it heats up. There's a really great teardown on iFixit where they very carefully, and whoever did this teardown has my kudos, because getting the screen off of the base of this unit without cracking it is a pretty amazing piece of handiwork there. But there's this massive chunk of copper inside of it to act as a heat sink and distribute the heat around the unit. And it's really interesting because the previous generation was known for getting hot. And when you run, in my case, I was turning a 40 40-minute file that was 3 gigabytes and compressing it with MPEG-4, using every core on the system down to like a 300 megabyte file. So we had everything running at 100%, and it was able to still run. It's a 2.5 gigahertz part. Turbos up to 3 gigahertz, or 2.4 gigahertz part, the turbos up to 3 gigahertz. And it was running most of the time around 2900 gigahertz, and finally slowed down after a while down to 600, then back up to 2900. But I point that out because it was running at some level of turbo mode the entire time with all of the cores maxed out. And that's a pretty nice job of thermal management, and on something that's super tiny. And the build quality is fantastic. Everybody who's touched this has just been all over it like a cheap suit. And I shouldn't say that too loud. Darren from over at Hack5 might take offense, but he's actually like, if it came with 32 gigabytes of RAM. And that's kind of like the one challenge, because if you want, all of the memory and all of the processor, Microsoft is going to send you with all of your checkbook up to the Surface Book, which I got about 5 minutes out at a meeting, which I was surprised at how good the joint feels, how solid it is. Again, the screen is fantastic. Battery life radically changes whether or not, because the battery, I guess additional battery power is in the keyboard base, and that's where they put the GPU, right?
Yeah, so on the Surface Book, apparently the battery in the tablet is only 18 watt hours, but the battery in the base is like 63 watt hours or something like that. Like, it's a much larger battery in the base. So they're basically saying, hey, we know that the majority of you should and will use this as a notebook, and if you use it as a tablet, it's kind of for a little bit of a period at a time. I'm actually still looking over at the desk. Yeah, it's still running a battery test on it now, on the Surface Book. But I feel like I'm going to keep one of these devices as my personal machine, but I haven't figured out which one it will be yet. The Surface Book, like you were talking about the Surface Pro 4 keyboard. I had used a touch keyboard or the type keyboard before. This one's way better. Like you said, it's way, way better. Like I wrote that my last Android to iPhone editorial on it and was surprised how good it was. But then the Surface Book keyboard's a little bit better than that even. The Surface Book keyboard feels like it's on par with what I fell in love with on the ThinkPad side. It's different design and everything, but like in terms of key throw and all that stuff.
It's got a really good, it has a fantastic touch or hand, or I type a lot, just like you. I mean, I'm typing like 80 words a minute, as many hours as I can stand. And a bad keyboard, especially on a laptop, is an miserable experience. It slows me down. My hands start to hurt. You know, so for them to have gone out and realized that, you know, hey, this keyboard's got to rock, and you know what? So does the trackpad. You know, it sounds obvious, but you know, this is a fantastic piece of engineering. And the book's really interesting. You know, there's you know, I don't know if we talked about it, but they're certainly making some money on these. These are not the least expensive items out there. They're comparable to premium products in the base configurations. If you start upgrading them, you're basically paying about twice as much for RAM or an SSD than you will if you buy it pre-configured. You will not be able to upgrade them, right? Because
after the fact, right?
Yeah, because it's funny with the iFixit teardown, you might be able to get another M.2 SSD inside of there if you can actually manage to pop the glass off of the base and pull a few more things out. You know, there's a slot there in a standard M.2 drive. If you are looking to upgrade the memory, it's not going to happen, because there were early rumors that the memory was upgradable, but it actually turns out to be the SSD, and I would call it upgradable if you are an unbelievably talented iFixit teardown engineer. I should point out they're an advertiser in this episode, but I'd still be mentioning iFixit even if they weren't, because I've seen them work and it's amazing. But you know, it's kind of frustrating. So if you think you're going to need 32 gigabytes of RAM for an editing machine, you probably should buy it first off. Or if you think you're going to need 16 gigabytes with Windows 10 on a Surface Pro 4, you should buy it up front, because upgrading is not going to be an option.
I'm still working on reviews of both of the devices. I don't know. Like, was using a 3x2 monitor display like a big shock for you? Originally,
I thought it was going to be, and then as I started using it, I mean the resolutions, you know,
3000 by 2000 on the Surface Book, and 27 by 18 something on the Surface 4.
2783, something like that.
Yeah, it's something odd. Yeah,
you know, the reality is you know, it has that you know, Retina display kind of feel.
It does.
You know. And I'm laughing because, you know, there's a special name for it, and I really want to look it up right now.
Yeah, because they talked about it was like a clarity through a touch screen. Yeah. Well,
it's funny, right? Because it's a legitimate question. It's, you know, I'm working with a 2560 by 1400 desktop or 1440 desktop, and going from that to 1080p screens is miserable. It drives me nuts. I don't like it, because I have gotten used to all of this real estate that is so incredibly useful on a desktop. So yeah, when I was looking, Pixel Sense touchscreen display, Pixel Sense, people. You know, so as I was looking at it, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then I started working, and I completely forgot about that. It's 3x2 and just worked.
That's true. I need to do. Honestly, when I use the SP4, it doesn't even feel like a 3x2 display in the same way that the Surface Book does. And I don't know, it has something to do with the form factor, because they're both the same aspect ratio. But
well, they've certainly done a lot to minimize the bezel on the Surface Pro 4. 2736 by 1824 is that resolution. You know, which is a non-standard resolution. But it's funny. You know, I think at this point, because my expectations for a laptop are calibrated by a 1080p screen, and my expectations on my desktop, you know, are by a 2560 by 1440 screen, a WQHDA. But I already expect to have you know, my laptops, which I love working on and work on constantly, are miserable compared to this big giant wide screen on my desktop. So whether it's 3x2 or 16x10 or 16x9 or whatever layout it is, it's not nearly as important as the fact that the keyboard feels good, the touchpad feels good, and the screen looks good, and the resolution is high enough on the screen that everything. Like I opened up an image from the Library of Congress, the Thomas Jefferson building, like the reading room, which is like I don't know, it's like 4,000 pixel. Image. It's a massive image up off of. I found it on the Wikipedia entry on the Library of Congress, and imagine what I was doing searching the Library of Congress. But it looked fantastic. It's gorgeous. You know, there's a micro SD card slot, which is nice because I've been in the situation recently where I'm looking at a laptop, and 128 gigabytes is killing me. And the ability to dump in a micro SD card would be really, really nice. I'd like an additional USB 3.0 port because I want more ports on everything I own. Mini display ports. It's a nice piece of hardware. If you want discrete graphics, you want 32 gigabytes of memory, you're going up to the Surface Book. That's a big jump. The Surface Pro 4, technically it starts at $899 with a Core M processor and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Don't buy that one. Find an extra $100 and get the entry-level one with a Core i5 and 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Agreed.
The Surface Book starts at $1499. It's a 13.5-inch screen. I was expecting to be irritated by the fact that the screen was 12:3, much more than the fact that it was 4:3. 12.3 inches rather than the fact that it was 4:3.
Right.
It was funny, and Darren was asking me. He's like, you can't really, because you think about it, especially if you've seen me at trade shows and stuff where I'm squirreled up in a corner with my laptop on my lap.
Yep.
And there's no joint in the Surface Pro 4, and then I realized I can screw myself in my weird little ball of laptop and productivity. I just have to position the kickstand.
The only thing I've noticed with that is, like, I was doing that. I was sitting on my couch essentially trying to use the Surface Pro 4, and I was wearing shorts at the time, and like the metal of the kickstand was kind of like digging into near my knees a little bit more. Like it just, I could, well, yes, I could feel it more than I expected to. And I'm also worried about, say you're on a plane, right? And you're using the tray. Will the Surface Pro 4, the fact that you have to have that kickstand pushed out in order to, support the screen, will that go into the space where usually there's a gap between the back of the tray and the seat in front of you, right? Like I want to actually take it on a plane and sit on a plane with it and see if that's a problem. If not having a traditional hinge makes it less useful on a plane if you're trying to use the keyboard part of it as well. But it's pretty, I don't think I'm going to book a flight just so I can go do that experiment. But if anybody knows a plane is just sitting on the ground somewhere, I could go get in. That would be great.
If there's a local science museum, you can see if they have airplane seats in there.
Yeah,
I don't know why. A lot of science museums around here have airplane seats.
Fair enough.
Although it's funny, the Lenovo's event for the Yoga 900, they had a selection of airplane seats. And part of me, I forgot to ask, where do you rent airplane seats?
Hey, you can do anything if you've got the money.
Yeah, that's true. This is true. I think I mentioned this for a second before, but let me make it more clear. Apple TVs are just starting to ship. The early reviewers that were seeded, which is interesting watching Apple, because it was like Walt Mossberg and Mashable and BuzzFeed were like three of the first reviews that showed up, which is an interesting change for Apple's PR team with their early units, seeding the early units. But I am waiting with bated breath. My Apple TV is processing. It's being boxed somewhere, so I'm going to get. It'll either be here Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or perhaps Tuesday. So I'll have it on. This week in computer hardware. We'll do a brief review of that next week, and I'll do a longer review of that on Tech Thing. Cool. I'm curious, especially after some of the early reviews I've read, and the other thing that was interesting was Apple being very upfront to some reviewers, basically saying that the only reason Amazon Prime isn't on the Apple TV is because Amazon hasn't submitted an application to their store. which I thought was
interesting.
very interesting. Yeah, I did not expect that, but they told a couple of people whose opinions I respect exactly that, and I think it'll be interesting to see where that ends up. Now that we've gotten excited about the wonderful world of Surface Pro 4s and Surface Books, we should talk to you about home security and knowing just exactly what's going on outside your door. Right?
We should do that. This episode of the show is brought to you guys in part by the Ring Video Doorbell. This is a device that lets you use your smartphone to see who's at your door. Did you know? I know, Patrick, you know, because we say this on the podcast every once in a while. Did you know that 95% of home break-ins happen during the day? Maybe you're out at work. Maybe you're out shopping and doing things, right? Burglars almost always start, though, by ringing your doorbell to see if someone's home before pillaging your possessions, and nobody likes to be pillaged. With the Ring Video Doorbell, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. Built into the Ring.com doorbell is an advanced motion detector. If someone comes to your door, you receive an alert on your smartphone, even if they don't actually hit the button and ring the doorbell, and that's obviously pretty handy. Installing the Ring takes minutes, really, and it comes with everything you need, including a drill bit and level. You can use it with your existing doorbell wiring, or you can use it with the included battery as well. It's like a rechargeable battery that it lasts a really long time. Like I said, every time we do one of these ads, it's been a number of weeks later that I still never had to recharge the battery on the device. I have still not recharged the device one time. So that's a pretty impressive kind of battery life statistic there. You can put your mind at ease and protect your home with the video doorbell that Time Magazine named one of the top 10 gadgets of 2014. It's super handy to have, guys. I use it at the office for like receiving packages. If FedEx comes to the door while I happen to be across the street picking up lunch, you know, they hit the doorbell, my phone rings up. I go, oh, hey, you know, I'll be there in like 5 minutes. Can you just leave the package? It'll be fine. And they go, yeah, sure, fine. I'll leave the box. And then, you know, I come back and get it. And I don't have to worry about going to the FedEx depot later in that day to pick up whatever cool gadget and gizmo somebody was trying to deliver to me. So that's a big help. So you can prevent burglaries or aid your shipping and receiving duties by going to ring.com/twitch. That's TWiCH, ring.com/twitch. And you can get free FedEx shipping, speaking of shipping, by going to that specific URL. That's ring.com/twitch. And we thank Ring for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. And with Ring, you are always home. That's the catchphrase here. With Ring, you are always home. And that's there's a lot of benefits to that. A lot of benefits.
Always being home.
Yes. Well, in real life and virtually through the Ring. That's always the case.
Oh, man. Samsung's enterprise SSD, the PM1725, hits 6 gigabytes per second and 1 million IOPS. I want a 950 Pro M.2 for the box. It's right over that shoulder. Pointing is hard. Alan did a full review of the 950 Pro SSD, but Sebastian wrote this up. This is crazy because as badass as the consumer drives are, the enterprise SSDs are even more ridiculous. Quote, the PM1725 is a PCI Express 3.0 X8 interface, and a 2.5-inch version will also be available, though limited to PCI Express 3.0 by 4, and with read speeds in excess of 6.2 gigabytes per second. The PM1725 sounds like a RAM disk, and if that wasn't enough, the drive managed 1 million IOPS from a demo performance for this new SSD at Dell World in Austin, Texas. Tom's hardware had hands-on time with the card and was able to run a few benchmarks verifying the outlandish speeds from this SSD. A 6.2 plus gigabyte per second result was coming from a 128K QD32 sequential test with the IOPS test run as a random 4K read. And then Sebastian points out, quote, I'm sure the price will be similarly out of this world, and this, of course, isn't a consumer-oriented or likely even bootable option. But yeah, if you have support on your motherboard for NVMe, Samsung 950 Pro, it's like $200 for the 256 gigabyte model, $350 for the 512 gigabyte model. You know, even as Sebastian points out, if they only offer up 2.5 gigabyte per second reads and 1.5 gigabyte per second writes, Yeah, I got to sell something so I can buy one of those right now.
It's pretty impressive that that's all coming out of a single device, right?
Yeah.
Like one SSD controller is able to do that. Because we did a thing with 4 Intel SSD 750 series drives running in a RAID configuration. And we were able to get like nearly 2 million IOPS, but it required 4 different devices. And this is able to do it off one. So it's pretty impressive stuff. Yeah.
Striping. It's amazing what you do with striping. It's funny. I was looking up on Newegg earlier, and they have a special with a couple of 240 gigabyte SATA 3 drives for $125. Unfortunately, they're OCZ Trions, which are not the most favored brand out there.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but boy, that's a cheap price for a couple of drives, a couple of SSDs. GIGABYTE adds Thunderbolt 3 support to existing Z170 motherboards. Yes. Sorry, I like Thunderbolt. How much is it going to cost? Can I afford it? Can I put it on any motherboard, or is it only GIGABYTE motherboards?
It says free right there in that picture. So here's the thing, right? This is just a firmware update.
Oh.
So the GIGABYTE motherboards, especially at the very least, those 3 listed here, the Z170X Gaming 1, the Gaming GT, and the Gaming 7, all shipped using the Intel Alpine Ridge controller on the motherboard. Now that controller supports both Thunderbolt 3 and USB 3.1. So when the motherboards came out, they were used as USB 3.1 controllers because the certification for Thunderbolt hadn't been completed yet. Now there's been certified for Thunderbolt 3, so GIGABYTE is allowed to advertise that they support Thunderbolt. They're allowed to release the firmware, the UEFI, the BIOS, whatever you want to call it, that will enable support for Thunderbolt on those existing boards. So this is a pretty neat thing for people that already own those boards that didn't have support for a feature, a pretty high-end feature, and now they have support for it in there. And if you are one of those people that is interested in Thunderbolt 3 like Patrick and you want to buy a motherboard that has it, now you have more options available to you that will cross, wider feature levels as well as wider, price ranges too. So that's a plus. And I had been told by many companies that the Thunderbolt certification system had been taking a long time, and so this kind of backs it up. So, but it's good to see it. It's working. It's there. It's ready.
Yay!
Now just bring us some Thunderbolt 3 devices.
Yeah, well,
products. It'll get there.
Any Thunderbolt motherboard and device is good with me. At least it's a start. Thermaltake Tough Power DPS G850 power supply review, 850 watt power supply review. I added this story in because I just want to say I think this is a striking look for a power supply. GIGABYTE, who apparently is no longer referred to as Robo in the title.
That was an old, outstanding nickname that we just recently removed from his profile for no particular reason.
I didn't know if there was an incident, if I just breached some sort of PC per etiquette when I mentioned that. But if you go to the top of page 2, there's this big metal inset in the top of it and rounded corners on the device. And I got to say, and I don't say this very often, it's a good-looking power supply if you're into that kind of thing.
It's definitely unique. It's definitely different. The only caveat, so I used one of these when we gave away a system 3 weeks ago, and the caveat to those rounded edges is like you have to put screws in those edges sometimes, like to mount it into a case. And so the screws they give you are actually longer than your normal power supply kind of wider thread screw. So it can reach a little bit further in as the curve goes around. So it's just a little hiccup, right, for that installation part of it, but it's unique nonetheless.
It's pretty crazy. So it's got a 7-year warranty from Thermaltake, 850 watts continuous DC output up to 50 degrees Celsius. We'll mention temperature in another minute. There's a digital processor inside to communicate with monitoring software if you're into that kind of thing. Plus or minus 2% on voltage regulation. Basically, the whole series is running from 450 watts up to 1,050 watts. 80 plus gold certified with at least 90% efficiency at 50% load. All Japanese electrolytic capacitors rated at 105 degrees Celsius. Supports multiple graphics adapters. There's 6 plus 2-pin PCIe connectors. Haswell ready, ERP lot ready. active power factor correction, OVP, UVP, SCP, and OPP in terms of safety precautions. Only one 12-volt EPS cable / connector included. That's one of the weaknesses, minor weaknesses. And it struggled to meet the 80+ gold efficiency rating at 150-volt AC at elevated temperatures, but gets a PC Perspective Gold Award. So that was pretty good performance from that. The price on them seems to be fairly reasonable for a premium power supply. I think it's like $155 on Newegg right now. MSRP is like $200. So don't pay MSRP unless you just like, never pay MSRP. So we should probably. Are you ready? I gotta ask. After your the 31-day experiment? Android, iPhone, day 31. You're talking about battery life, talking about closing on PC Per. Will you stick with the iPhone? Are you?
I'm going to. Yeah, I'm a convert, I guess, now. Yeah,
that hurts you to say, man.
It's really odd, right? Like, so it shouldn't hurt me because I took a look at a device for an extended period of time and I made an evaluation. I wrote about my experiences with it for a long time, and then made a decision based on it. But I know that there are going to be many people in this world that are going to be disappointed with me for making that decision for what they think is going over from the good guys to the bad guys, or whatever. But the truth is, it's just a great phone and device in total. And the last little editorial here kind of looks at kind of an actual battery life measurement. I've been talking about battery life on and off about just what it felt like it was, and here it was in kind of some kind of measured form. I will say the one thing that I almost changed on was I going to keep the 6S or was I going to keep the 6S Plus? Now, I like the smaller size in my hand of the 6S for sure, but if you look at the graph down there a little bit that shows battery life comparisons, the battery life on the 6S Plus is like 2.25 hours more than the 6S, right? And so you're going from a 1700 milliamp hour battery to a 2700 milliamp hour battery. So you're getting like a 60% increase in a battery size, but you're only getting and then you're getting like a 48% increase in maybe I had that backwards. 48% increase in battery and a 30-something% increase in battery life, right? So you have a higher resolution display on the 6S Plus, so that takes up a little extra power. But the rest of the processing hardware is essentially the same SoC, same GPS, all that, same radio, everything. So I was very tempted to go with the 6S Plus and kind of, as I say in the article, sacrifice my pocket in order to get the additional battery life that the larger phone provided. But in the end, kind of went, yeah, maybe next time I'll do that. For now, I think I'm okay with this in terms of size and battery life balance. But anybody that knows me, whether it be laptops or phones or tablets, nearly at the top of my list is battery life for everything. Now, I don't have, I'm using a Dell XPS 13. If I was really worried about battery life, I'd have like a Lenovo T450S with 2 extra 9-cell batteries that I carry around with me all the time. So battery life is the most important thing to me, with a balance of everything else: performance, aesthetics, form factor, etc. And so, like, for me currently, that's the XPS 13. And for me currently, that's the iPhone 6S. So that doesn't mean I'm not going to use Android devices. We still have Android devices coming in. We're getting an Android Turbo 2 for review relatively soon. And I still have the OnePlus 2 that I need to write up my findings on as well. So we'll just see how that goes going forward. But yeah, I have missed the return date for my iPhone 6S. So now I keep this phone. Yes.
Whether you like it or not, you own it, man. Oh my goodness. It's just funny. You know, I don't know. You've spent a long time working on this one. It's been interesting. The more time I spend with Android, the more I like it. But you know, applications kept pulling me back on the iPhone side of things. And that camera. Oh, that camera. Although the Android cameras are finally getting good. Yep. We got something new from iFixit. I have seen one of these, and I want one of these desperately. The Repair Business Toolkit. iFixit's our final sponsor for this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. The name says it all. It is everything you need to kickstart your repair business or take. Basically, it's a tech go bag. If you want a tech go bag that is operating at the next level, this is it. It's like one each of all the best iFixit tools in a nice custom shoulder bag to make on-the-go repair efficient and effective. It is a crazy list of gear inside of here, right? So the ProTech Toolkit, you've seen us show this off. I've got one of them in the desk behind me. It is the iFixit standard for repair toolkit. 70 tools to help you dish sweet repair justice. All in a nice container that rolls up. The magnetic project mat, which I was using. You can see it there in the upper left-hand corner. I was using that just again last week when I was pulling apart a couple of M.2 enclosures. The portable anti-static mat. It's got the ProTech screwdriver set, which is some nice pro-grade screwdrivers for repetitive, heavy-use jobs, or if you prefer a fuller handle on your little crazy Apple screwdriver. Eye opener, which is iFixit tool they invented to assistantly apply heat directly to adhesive-laden case components, which is actually a big part of how they managed to get the screen off of the Surface Pro 4 in their teardown. Heavy-duty suction cups for iMac screens and heavy displays, a digital multimeter, so you can work on your diagnosis and troubleshooting. Lots of extra plastic opening tools, cleaning tools, a dust blower, screen cleaner, microfiber cloth brush. It's all in a custom iFixit messenger bag. It's perfect for storage or to take your repair shop on the go. Basically, it's everything you need to kickstart your repair business with a complete arsenal of tools. And it's a pretty steep discount once you put everything together. It's $249. That's $100 less than buying everything individually. Buy it for yourself, for new employees, give it as a gift. And best of all, of course, if you haven't been there, iFixit.com has an amazing collection of guides and tutorials to help you put all these tools to use. You can fix your friend's cracked iPad screen, swap the battery in your neighbor's iPhone, build or upgrade a laptop or PC. The possibilities are endless with the Repair Business Toolkit. And I'll be honest with you, I've used the ProTech Toolkits for a long time. They get used in a lot of places in my life, around the house, in the car, on computers, fixing people's eyeglasses. They're a good set of bits, and they are easy to use. So do yourself a favor. When you go to iFixit.com, go to iFixit.com/twit. You can save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more by entering the code TWiCH at checkout. iFixit.com/twit. Use the code TWiCH when you check out. You'll be helping to support This Week in Computer Hardware, and you'll be getting yourself some great repair tools. iFixit.com. Use the code TWiCH, TWICH, to save $10. We want to thank iFixit for their support of the show. It is good stuff, people.
Yep.
It's
couple more real quick things.
Yeah, it's been at least 2 weeks since we introduced another MicroATX enclosure, which is too long. So we not only have a MicroATX enclosure, but one that sells for $49.99 MSRP, which means you'll probably find it for sale for like $12.
Yep.
I exaggerate, but it's kind of crazy. If you go to the story up on PCPro.com, Tech Power Up got pretty deep inside of it. But if you scroll down a little bit, it's amazing how well thought out this case is, right? So you've got room for water cooling inside of that case, multiple fans. It is, as somebody who ended up ripping off the top of their older PC case to put a massive Corsair cooler inside of it, the layout on this is really thoughtful, and it's amazing how compact you can get everything in there. So the Carbide 88R, it's a pretty decent brush. It's good looking, brush finish front, $49.99. Availability is not up yet, so we don't know when it's going to be available. But I want to see if I can get one of those in for review, because that looks like a really clean configuration.
Yeah, it doesn't look super flashy, but it's got a big window on it. And honestly, when I first looked at this picture, I didn't even think it was a mini ITX case. It kind of has the look and styling of a larger case.
Yeah.
And not just because it's mini ITX doesn't mean it has to look funky along the way. So I commend them for this.
Doesn't mean it has to look funky, people.
Put that on the box.
They should put that on the box. Oh, my goodness. One last story before we go. Batman's Arkham Knight being re-released on PC October 28. Do you want to get into the backstory on this?
Wow. So I'm trying to remember what was the original release date. It mentions it in this story. So Batman Arkham Knight came out about 4 months ago. maybe just a little bit over 4 months ago. And it came out on the PC and the consoles at the same time. On the PC version, there were huge issues with stability, frame rate, feature drop, just huge issues with, both sides, NVIDIA and AMD. No one culprit here. And the developer the publisher came out and said, hey, look, as it turns out, the developer we had do the PC port, who took the console version and made a PC game out of it, maybe they didn't do the best job. So we're gonna patch it. Just give us some time. We're gonna give it a patch. And they released like one patch. It didn't fix hardly anything. And they said, you know what? It's probably best if we just take the game off Steam. If you already own it, you can still play it. But we're gonna take it off Steam for a little while. And it took 4+ months to get that back. It's now October 28th. Batman Arkham Knight was re-released on the PC platform yesterday, and also a patch that brings the PC version fully up to date with content that has been released for the console. So not only are you getting, you'll get access to some of the DLC essentially as a sorry we screwed this up so bad type gesture, but then in theory you also have a completely fixed experience as well. So that is also important. So if you already own the game, you'll get that patch, and then it'll update it and improve things. And if you don't, you can go buy the game now and have some kind of reasonable assurance that the experience will be something that you'll actually want to see. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't go out and buy the game and waited for some other people to bite that bullet for you and figure out if it is actually fixed. But it would be hard for me to believe they would re-release it now totally broken, but maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. I haven't felt the internet blow up from that, because that would definitely be the case. So I feel safe in saying it's probably okay.
It's probably okay. High praise, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the new Apple TV reviews coming up. Apple TV reviews coming up next week. I'll be curious to see if there's a meaningful difference for me if I upgrade my Skylake box, my Core i7-6770 to one of the NVMe drives on the motherboard, just because, outside when I'm doing stuff with video, I think it'll be noticeable. But I'm curious if for the majority of daily use, whether or not that will be a noticeable improvement. In part because so much of what I do is so thoroughly satisfied by a regular 850 Evo, like a 1 terabyte SSD. But I don't know. I'm really curious about that. I've been playing around. Where did they go? There's a big pile of magnetic planar or orthodynamic headphones that I've been obsessed with, and I'll be talking about those in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, boy, just when you think you've got your whole sort of headphone equation figured out, don't tell Jeremy about this, you hear something and it just blows your socks off. But I'll talk about the ins and outs of that. It's a really fascinating technology. It's essentially taking an extraordinarily light, thin layer of material, putting a grid of conductive material across it and suspending it in between two massive neodymium magnet structures. And so you have a full sort of wall of sound pumping towards your eardrums rather than a point source from a traditional dynamic driver. But the whole concept's been around for decades. Fostex has been making them nonstop. Yamaha came up with the orthodynamic concept. But when they're implemented well, they sound extraordinary, and the bass is pretty much flat down to levels you probably can't hear. But it's a very different listening experience from most dynamic headphones. But yeah, my headphone obsession continues, and I may even be thinking about buying a new GPU soon. We kind of skipped the questions this week because we had a lot going on, but we will get a pile of questions in next week. Best thing to do if you want to tweet at Ryan Shrout or at Patrick Norton. If you want to find more Ryan, go to PCPro.com. It is his life after the baby and the wife. It is his life. I think it's fair to put the baby and the wife ahead of us. I'm going to get in trouble if I'm given any opportunity. And I'm over at techthing.com, TEKTHING.com, or youtube.com/techthing. Yeah, I like computers. I had a lot of fun with the Elementary OS this week, which is a Debian's, or I should say essentially it's an Ubuntu spinoff. But boy, it's amazing. Like once it was installed, it's amazing how flawless Linux performance has gotten. I had it on a 2015 laptop. It recognized everything. I had it on a 2 or 3 year old system. All the drivers worked. Performance was great. Looks fantastic. Took me 5 hours to get it installed on both machines because of issues. I thought I finally actually managed to kill a motherboard by tweaking settings. But it's amazing how messy UEFI installations can get. If a couple of things don't go right. That and Secure Boot. Secure Boot is a pain in the ass.
Yep.
If you have a question about Secure Boot, do me a favor, text us, tweet at us at Patrick Norton or at Ryan Shrout. We'll talk about it next week. And with that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week.